Victoria Ann stood in the doorway of the last house she could find before the sun set completely, her hand trembling as she knocked again, harder this time. The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly behind her, swallowing the horizon in shades of crimson and gold, and she had been riding for 3 days straight with nothing but stale bread and tepid water from her canteen. When the door finally swung open, she found herself staring up at a man whose weathered face told stories of sun and hardship, his green eyes studying her with curiosity rather than the suspicion she had grown accustomed to. "Please," Victoria said, her voice cracking slightly. "I need directions to Apache Junction. My wagon broke down about 5 miles back and my horse went lame. I have been walking since noon." The rancher stood there in his worn leather vest and dusty boots, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, despite appearing to be only in his early 30s. He glanced past her at the empty landscape, then back to her face, taking in her disheveled appearance and the exhaustion carved into her features. "Apache Junction is 20 miles northwest of here, madam. You would not make it before nightfall, and the temperature drops fierce once the sun goes down." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Name is Isaac Rivers. I run this cattle ranch alone, have for the past 6 years. You are welcome to stay the night, get your bearings, and I will help you with your wagon come morning." Victoria hesitated, her mother's warnings about trusting strangers echoing in her mind. But the alternative was spending the night in the open desert with nothing but her shawl for warmth. She studied Isaac's face, searching for any hint of dishonesty or ill intent, but found only genuine concern. "Victoria Ann," she said finally, "I appreciate your kindness. I do not want to impose, but I confess I am at my limit." Isaac nodded and gestured for her to enter. The interior of his home surprised her. She had expected the typical bachelor's quarters, sparse and utilitarian, but instead found a well-maintained space with handmade furniture that showed real craftsmanship. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already crackling with warmth, and shelves lined with books spoke of a man who valued education and culture, despite his isolated existence. "You can wash up over there," Isaac said, pointing to a basin near the window. "I will get some supper together. Nothing fancy, just beef stew and cornbread, but it is hot and filling." Victoria moved to the basin gratefully, washing the trail dust from her face and hands. The water was cool and clean, and she felt some of her anxiety begin to ease. As she dried her hands on the towel Isaac provided, she watched him move around the kitchen area with practiced efficiency. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel safer than she had in days. "What brings you to Arizona Territory?" Isaac asked as he stirred the pot on the stove. "It is 1882, and this is still rough country for a woman traveling alone." Victoria settled into the chair he had indicated, grateful to be off her feet. "My aunt passed away 3 months ago in Tucson. She left me her boarding house, and I have been trying to reach it to claim the property before it reverts to the territorial government. I started from Santa Fe, where I was working as a school teacher." Isaac ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table along with thick slices of cornbread. "Santa Fe to Tucson is a hard journey even with proper equipment. What happened to your wagon?" "The axle cracked," Victoria said, accepting the bowl with a grateful smile. "I tried to repair it myself, but I do not have the proper tools or knowledge. Then my horse stepped in a hole and came up lame. I thought if I could just reach the next town, I could hire someone to help retrieve everything." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, Victoria savoring every bite of the hearty stew. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Isaac watched her with quiet amusement, pleased to see someone appreciate his cooking. "I can take you out to your wagon tomorrow," Isaac said. "I have the tools and the know how to fix an axle, and I can look at your horse. If it is just a strain, a few days of rest might set things right. If it is worse, well, we will figure something out." Victoria looked up from her bowl, her brown eyes shining with unshed tears of gratitude. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me at all." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his expression becoming distant. "6 years ago, my wife Sarah died giving birth to our daughter. The baby did not survive either. I was in town when it happened, dealing with a cattle buyer. A neighbor woman found them and tried to help, but it was too late. If someone had been there, someone who knew what to do, maybe things would have turned out different." His voice carried such pain that Victoria felt her heart clench. "I am so sorry." "I learned something that day," Isaac continued, meeting her gaze again. "We are all just trying to survive out here, and sometimes a little kindness is the difference between making it and not. I would not want anyone to suffer for lack of help if I could provide it." Victoria reached across the table impulsively and touched his hand. "Your wife and daughter were lucky to have you." Isaac's fingers curled around hers briefly before he pulled back, clearing his throat. "Tell me about Santa Fe. I have never been that far north." They talked late into the evening, Victoria describing the Pueblo architecture and vibrant markets of Santa Fe, while Isaac shared stories of his ranch and the challenges of managing cattle in the harsh Arizona landscape. She learned that he had come from Missouri originally, that he had built this house with his own hands, and that he took pride in being one of the few ranchers in the area who treated his Mexican workers with respect and fair wages. "Most of the big outfits around here exploit anyone they can," Isaac said, his jaw tightening. "They pay the Mexican hands half what they pay white workers for the same labor, sometimes less. It is not right, and I will not be part of it. Every man who works for me gets the same wage for the same work, and they get Sundays off for their families." Victoria found herself warming to him even more. In Santa Fe, she had witnessed plenty of injustice toward Mexican families, and she had always spoken out against it, even when it made her unpopular with other teachers. "That is admirable. Not many people think that way." "Thinking that way is just basic decency," Isaac said. "Though I admit it has made me some enemies among the other ranchers. They say I am driving up expectations and making it harder for them to turn a profit." "Good," Victoria said firmly. "Perhaps their profits should not come from exploiting people." Isaac smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. "I think I like you, Miss Anne." "Victoria, please," she said, feeling her cheeks warm. "And I think I like you too, Mr. Rivers." "Isaac," he corrected with that same smile. He showed her to a small bedroom that clearly had not been used in some time, though it was clean and tidy. "This was going to be the nursery," he said quietly. "I have not had the heart to change anything, but it seems right that someone should use it." Victoria touched his arm gently. "Thank you for trusting me with this space." After Isaac left her alone, Victoria lay in the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the desert night through the window. Coyotes called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the scrub brush. She thought about Isaac's kindness, his obvious pain, and the way his smile had made something flutter in her chest. It had been a long time since she had felt any sort of attraction to a man. Her teaching position had consumed all her time and energy, and the men in Santa Fe had mostly been either married or entirely unsuitable. But Isaac was different. There was a depth to him, a quiet strength that drew her in. She found herself hoping that her wagon would take more than a day to repair, just so she could spend more time in his company. The next morning, Victoria woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly, braiding her long auburn hair and doing her best to look presentable despite her limited options. When she emerged from the bedroom, Isaac was already setting the table for breakfast, and the early morning sun streaming through the windows painted everything in shades of gold. "Morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Victoria admitted. "Your home is very peaceful." They ate breakfast together, planning the day ahead. Isaac explained that he would need to check on his cattle first, make sure they had not strayed during the night, and then they would ride out to her wagon. He offered her one of his horses, a gentle mare named Rosie who had a steady temperament. Victoria helped him clean up after breakfast, and then they walked out to the barn together. The ranch was more extensive than she had realized, with a good-sized barn, several corrals, and what looked like bunkhouses for hired hands. "Where are your workers?" she asked. "I only keep a few hands year-round," Isaac explained. "Most of them live in town with their families and ride out here for the day. Right now, I am between hiring, doing most of the work myself, until spring when I will need extra help with the calving season." He saddled 2 horses with practiced ease, and Victoria found herself watching the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt, the casual competence in every gesture. When he helped her mount Rosie, his hands on her waist sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. They rode out across the desert landscape, Isaac leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and ravine. Victoria found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, enjoying the simple pleasure of having a destination and a companion. The sun climbed higher, warming her shoulders, and she pushed back her bonnet to feel the breeze on her face. "There," she said after about 45 minutes, pointing to where her wagon sat listing to one side, looking forlorn and abandoned. Isaac dismounted and examined the damage while Victoria checked on her belongings. Everything was still there, covered with the canvas tarp she had secured before setting out on foot. Her horse, a sweet-tempered gelding named Porter, stood hobbled nearby, favoring his right front leg. "The axle is cracked clean through," Isaac said, running his hands along the brake. "I can fix it, but it will take most of the day. I will need to ride back to the ranch for my tools and some lumber." He moved over to Porter, speaking softly to the horse as he examined the injured leg. After a few minutes, he straightened up with a relieved expression. "Just a bad strain, I think. A week or 2 of rest and he should be fine. We will pony him back to my place and keep him in the barn." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you. I was so worried I would have to leave him behind." "Never," Isaac said firmly. "I would not abandon an animal any more than I would abandon a person." They worked together to transfer Victoria's belongings to Isaac's horse, tying everything down securely. Then Isaac mounted up, leading Porter by a rope while Victoria rode Rosie. The journey back to the ranch took longer with the injured horse in tow, but Isaac was patient, never pushing Porter beyond a slow walk. Back at the ranch, Isaac settled Porter in the barn with food, water, and a thick bed of straw. He wrapped the injured leg carefully, his hands gentle and sure, and Victoria found herself fascinated by his knowledge and competence. "You are good with animals," she observed. "Had to learn," Isaac said. "Out here, you cannot always wait for a veterinarian to show up. Most of the time, you have to handle things yourself." They spent the rest of the morning loading Isaac's wagon with the tools and supplies he would need to repair Victoria's axle. He worked methodically, checking each item off a mental list, and Victoria helped where she could. By the time they were ready to head back out, it was nearly noon. "This will take me several hours," Isaac said as they approached her wagon again. You do not have to stay and watch if you would rather ride back to the ranch. It is not exciting work. But Victoria shook her head. I would like to stay if you do not mind. I want to learn how to do this in case it happens again. Isaac looked surprised but pleased. All right then. Hand me that toolbox when I ask for it, and I will show you what I am doing. They worked together in the afternoon heat, Isaac explaining each step of the process while Victoria listened and helped where she could. She learned how to measure and cut lumber to the right length, how to fit the new piece into place, and how to secure it with bolts and metal brackets. Isaac's teaching style was patient and thorough, never talking down to her or assuming she could not understand the mechanics involved. You are a natural, he said as she successfully tightened a bolt without stripping the threads. Most people over-tighten and end up making more work for themselves. Victoria felt a flush of pride at his praise. I always liked working with my hands. When I was teaching, I helped maintain the schoolhouse, fixing broken desks and patching the roof. The school board thought it was strange for a woman to do that kind of work, but I did not care. Nothing strange about it, Isaac said. Practical skills are practical skills, no matter who has them. As they worked, they talked about their lives, sharing stories and discovering unexpected commonalities. Victoria learned that Isaac had taught himself to read when he was 12, sneaking books from the plantation owner's library, where his father worked as a blacksmith. Isaac learned that Victoria had lost both her parents to cholera when she was 15, forcing her to make her own way in the world years earlier than most young women. It made me independent, Victoria said, wiping sweat from her forehead. But it also made me lonely sometimes. Teaching was rewarding, but I always felt like I was on the outside looking in, never quite part of any community. I know that feeling, Isaac said quietly. After Sarah died, people in town did not know what to do with me. The married couples did not want a widower at their dinner parties, and the single women saw me as either a charity case or a prize to be won. Eventually, I just stopped going into town except when I had to. Victoria looked at him, seeing the isolation carved into the lines around his eyes. That must have been terribly lonely. It was, Isaac admitted. It still is most days, but I throw myself into the work, keep my hands busy and tell myself it is enough. Is it? Victoria asked softly. Isaac met her gaze and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. No, he said finally. No, it is not. They finished the repair as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. Isaac tested the new axle thoroughly, making sure it would hold, and then they loaded Victoria's belongings back into her wagon. I will hitch one of my horses to pull it back to the ranch, Isaac said. We can leave your wagon there until Porter is healed enough to travel, and then I will help you get to Tucson. You have already done so much, Victoria protested. I cannot ask you to do more. You are not asking, Isaac said. I am offering. Besides, it is another week or two before Porter will be fit to travel, and I would appreciate the company. Gets quiet out here with just me and the cattle. Victoria felt her heart lift at the prospect of spending more time with him. Then I accept, gratefully. The ride back to the ranch in the gathering dusk felt different somehow, charged with possibility. Victoria drove her repaired wagon while Isaac rode alongside on his horse, and they talked about everything and nothing, their words flowing easily in the cooling air. Over the following days, Victoria settled into life at the ranch in a way that surprised them both. She insisted on earning her keep, helping with cooking and cleaning, but also joining Isaac in his daily work. She learned to mend fence lines, to check cattle for signs of disease, and to read the desert sky for signs of coming weather. Isaac found himself looking forward to each morning, to the sound of Victoria moving around in the kitchen, to the way she hummed softly while she worked. She brought life back to the house in a way he had not experienced since Sarah died, but it was different too. With Sarah, he had been young and idealistic, building a future on dreams and determination. With Victoria, he felt older and wiser, appreciating small moments and quiet companionship in a way he never had before. One evening, about a week into Victoria's stay, they sat on the porch after dinner watching the stars emerge. The desert night was cool and clear, the sky so vast it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. "I used to be afraid of the night," Victoria said, her voice soft. "When I was a child, I thought darkness meant danger, but out here the night feels different, peaceful somehow." "It is the silence," Isaac said. "In town, there is always noise, always something happening, but out here the quiet lets you hear yourself think." Victoria turned to look at him, his profile etched against the starlight. "Do you ever get lonely out here, Isaac? Truly lonely?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I did," he said finally. "Every day for 6 years, but not since you arrived." Victoria felt her breath catch. "Isaac, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you have a life waiting for you in Tucson, plans and responsibilities. But I cannot help how I feel. Having you here has reminded me what it is like to be alive, really alive, instead of just going through the motions." Victoria reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "It is not too soon. I feel it too. I have been trying to tell myself it is gratitude or loneliness or just the strangeness of the situation, but it is more than that. I have not felt this way about anyone since, well, since ever." Isaac turned to her, his eyes searching her face in the dim light. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I came here looking for directions to Apache Junction, but I think I found something else instead, something I did not even know I was looking for." He reached up to cup her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Victoria, I do not want to make you feel pressured. You have your aunt's boarding house waiting, a whole new life ahead of you." "I know," Victoria said, "but maybe that life could include you. Maybe we could figure this out together." Isaac leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to, but Victoria met him halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing these new waters. But then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, and Victoria felt herself leaning into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I have not felt this way in so long I almost forgot what it was like." "Neither have I," Victoria whispered. "What do we do now, I think?" Isaac said slowly. "We take this one day at a time. No rushing, no pressure, just seeing where this leads us." Victoria nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I can do that." Over the next week, their relationship deepened in small, meaningful ways. Isaac taught Victoria to ride better, taking her out across the ranch and showing her the land he loved. They found a natural spring tucked into a canyon, its water clear and cold, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided rare shade. It became their special place, where they would ride in the evenings to watch the sunset and talk about their hopes and fears. Victoria told Isaac about her dreams of running the boarding house, of creating a place where travelers felt welcome and cared for. "My aunt ran it for 30 years, she said. "People would come back year after year because she made them feel like family. I want to do that too, to build something lasting and meaningful." "You will," Isaac said with confidence. "You have that gift of making people feel valued. I felt it the first night you were here." They also talked about harder things, like Isaac's grief over losing his wife and daughter, and Victoria's lingering anger at the cholera epidemic that took her parents. These conversations brought them closer, creating a foundation of trust and understanding that went beyond simple attraction. One afternoon, while Victoria was helping Isaac repair a section of the barn roof, a rider appeared on the horizon. Isaac tensed immediately, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle he kept nearby. "Who is that?" Victoria asked, shading her eyes against the sun. "Looks like Tom Hendricks," Isaac said, his voice hardening. "He owns the ranch 3 miles east of here. We have had some disagreements over water rights and worker treatment." The rider approached slowly, and Victoria could see he was a large man in his 50s, with a florid face and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the desert. He pulled his horse to a stop near the barn and looked down at Isaac with obvious disdain. "Rivers," he said by way of greeting. "Heard you had a woman staying with you. Wanted to see if it was true." "What business is it of yours, Hendricks?" Isaac asked, his voice level but cold. "Just being neighborly," Hendricks said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Course, when an unmarried woman stays at a bachelor's ranch unchaperoned, people talk. Would not want the lady's reputation to suffer." Victoria felt anger flare in her chest. She climbed down from the roof carefully and faced Hendricks directly. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but my reputation is my own business. Mr. Rivers has been nothing but a gentleman, and I will thank you not to suggest otherwise." Hendricks looked at her with surprise, clearly not expecting her to speak up. "Well now, you have got some spirit, but facts are facts, miss. People will draw their own conclusions." "Then let them," Victoria said firmly. "I know the truth, and that is what matters." Isaac stepped up beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "I think you should leave now, Hendricks, and you can tell anyone who asks that Miss Anne is a guest in my home and will be treated with respect, both here and in town." Hendricks's face reddened. "You think you are better than the rest of us, Rivers, with your high-minded ideas about fair wages and equal treatment. But you are just one man, and sooner or later, you will learn that bucking the system gets you nowhere." "I will take my chances," Isaac said quietly. "Now get off my property." Hendricks glared at them both for a long moment, then wheeled his horse around and rode off at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Victoria watched him go, her hands trembling slightly with leftover adrenaline. That was unpleasant. "He is right about one thing," Isaac said, his voice troubled. "People will talk, and it could hurt you. Maybe I should ride into Apache Junction and hire a woman to come stay as a chaperone." But Victoria shook her head. "I am not a child, Isaac, and I am not going to live my life based on what small-minded people think. I know we have been proper, and that is enough for me." Isaac looked at her with such admiration that it made her heart skip. "You are an extraordinary woman, Victoria Ann." "And you are an extraordinary man, Isaac Rivers," she replied, kissing him softly. "We will face whatever comes together." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Victoria brought up the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Porter is almost healed. In a few more days I will need to continue on to Tucson." Isaac's hand stilled in the middle of chopping vegetables. "I know." "Come with me," Victoria said suddenly. "Come to Tucson, see the boarding house, spend some time in town. We can figure out what this means for both of us." Isaac set down the knife and turned to face her. "Victoria, I cannot just leave the ranch. The cattle need to be checked every day, the property needs maintenance. I have responsibilities here." "Could you hire someone to watch things for a week or two?" Victoria asked. "There must be someone you trust." Isaac was quiet, thinking. "There is Miguel Garcia. He worked for me last year and knows the property well. He has been looking for steady work since his last employer refused to pay him fairly." "Then hire him," Victoria urged. "Isaac, I am not asking you to abandon your ranch forever. I am just asking you to give us a real chance to see if this could work beyond these few weeks of isolation." Isaac pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. "You are right. I am making excuses because I am afraid. Afraid that once we leave this place, this bubble we have created, reality will intrude and everything will fall apart." Victoria pulled back to look up at him. "Or maybe reality will prove that what we have is strong enough to survive in the real world. We will not know unless we try." "All right," Isaac said, a smile breaking through his worry. "I will ride into town tomorrow and find Miguel, offer him 2 weeks of work. Then we will go to Tucson together." The next day, Isaac rode into Apache Junction while Victoria stayed at the ranch, using the time to wash all her clothes and prepare for the journey ahead. When Isaac returned late in the afternoon, he was smiling. "Miguel agreed," he said, dismounting and taking Victoria's hands in his. "He will start tomorrow, and I will spend a day showing him everything he needs to know. Then the day after, we can leave for Tucson." Victoria threw her arms around his neck, relief and excitement flooding through her. "Thank you for being willing to try." "I would do anything for you," Isaac said simply. "These past 2 weeks have shown me that." Miguel arrived the next morning with his wife Rosa, a practical woman who immediately took charge of organizing the household supplies. She and Victoria hit it off instantly, bonding over their shared frustration with men who could not find anything in their own kitchens. Miguel proved to be as competent as Isaac remembered, asking intelligent questions and taking careful notes about the cattle's routines. As Isaac showed Miguel around the property, Victoria spent time talking with Rosa, learning about the challenges Mexican families faced in the Arizona territory. Rosa spoke of employers who cheated them on wages, of shopkeepers who charged them higher prices, of being treated as less than human simply because of where they were born. "Isaac is different," Rosa said, kneading dough for bread. "When Miguel worked for him before, he paid exactly what he promised, and he spoke to Miguel like an equal. That is rare, very rare." Victoria felt her love for Isaac deepen even further. It was one thing to talk about fairness and justice, quite another to live it consistently, even when it made life harder. That evening, after Miguel and Rosa had settled into one of the bunkhouses, Isaac and Victoria took one last ride out to their spring. They sat on the rocks overlooking the water, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I am going to miss this," Victoria said softly. "This place, this peace." "It will still be here," Isaac said. "We can come back anytime you want." Victoria turned to him, her expression serious. "Isaac, we need to talk about what happens in Tucson. I have responsibilities there, a property to manage. And you have this ranch, this life you have built. How do we make that work?" Isaac took a deep breath. "I have been thinking about that. Tucson is not that far from here, maybe 2 or 3 days' ride. I could hire Miguel on permanently, have him manage the day-to-day operations here. I would need to come back regularly to check on things, but I could base myself in Tucson with you. You would do that?" Victoria asked, hardly daring to believe it. "You would leave your ranch for me?" "I would not be leaving it," Isaac corrected gently. "I would be expanding my life to include both the ranch and you. The ranch has been my whole world for 6 years, but maybe it is time for my world to get bigger." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want you to resent me later, to feel like you gave up something important." "You are what is important," Isaac said, cupping her face in his hands. "This ranch was my refuge after Sarah died, a place to hide from the world and my grief. But I do not want to hide anymore. I want to live again, really live, and I want to do that with you." They kissed as the sun set, the future spreading out before them like the endless desert sky, full of possibility and promise. 2 days later, they set out for Tucson in Victoria's wagon, with Isaac riding alongside on his horse. Porter was fully recovered, pulling the wagon with his usual steady temperament. The journey would take 3 days, and they planned to camp under the stars rather than pushing the horses too hard. The first night, they made camp near a dried riverbed, building a small fire and cooking beans and cornbread. Victoria sat close to Isaac, watching the flames dance and feeling more content than she had in years. "Tell me about the boarding house," Isaac said. "What does it look like?" Victoria smiled, picturing it in her mind. It is a 2-story adobe building right in the heart of Tucson, with 12 rooms for guests and living quarters on the first floor. My aunt wrote that it needs some repairs, but the structure is sound. There is a courtyard in the center with a fountain, though I do not know if the fountain still works. "We can fix it if it does not," Isaac said. "Between the two of us, I bet we can handle most of the repairs." The word "we" sent a warm glow through Victoria's chest. She leaned her head on Isaac's shoulder, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. They reached Tucson on the afternoon of the 3rd day, entering the bustling town as the heat of the day began to ease. Tucson was larger than Victoria remembered from her brief visit years ago, with new buildings and a railroad station that had brought even more growth and commerce. The boarding house stood on a quiet street near the center of town, its whitewashed walls glowing in the afternoon sun. Victoria's hands shook as she produced the key her aunt's lawyer had sent her, turning it in the lock and pushing open the heavy wooden door. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light coming through the shuttered windows. The furniture was covered with sheets, giving everything a ghostly appearance. But beneath the neglect, Victoria could see the bones of a beautiful place. The tiles on the floor were handmade and colorful, the wooden beams on the ceiling carved with intricate patterns. The courtyard fountain stood silent and dry, but it was an impressive piece of stonework that would be stunning once restored. "It is perfect," Isaac said, looking around with appreciation. "Your aunt had wonderful taste." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the building, taking inventory of what needed to be done. The roof needed some patching, several windows had cracked panes, and the fountain would need new pipes. But the rooms were spacious and well-proportioned, and Victoria could already imagine them filled with guests. As the sun set, they walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner, both too tired to cook. Over plates of enchiladas and rice, they discussed their plans for the boarding house. "We should hire local workers for the repairs," Victoria said. "People who know adobe construction and can match the style." "Agreed," Isaac said. "And we should pay them fairly. It will cost more upfront, but we will get better work and a better reputation." Victoria reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Listen to us, planning like we have been doing this together for years." "Maybe we have, in a way," Isaac said. "Maybe we were always heading toward this moment, we just did not know it yet." Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into renovating the boarding house. Isaac proved invaluable, his ranching skills translating surprisingly well to construction and repair. He hired a crew of 3 Mexican workers who were skilled in traditional building methods, and together they patched the roof, repaired the fountain, and replaced the broken windows. Victoria focused on the interior, cleaning years of dust and neglect from every surface. She washed curtains, scrubbed floors, and polished furniture until the whole place gleamed. She also began reaching out to potential guests, placing advertisements in the local newspaper and visiting other business owners to introduce herself. In the evenings, exhausted but satisfied, They would sit in the courtyard and listen to the newly restored fountain splash. They talked about everything from politics to poetry, discovering new layers to each other with every conversation. Isaac shared his dream of one day writing a book about ranching in the Arizona Territory, while Victoria confessed her secret ambition to teach again someday, perhaps starting a small school for the children of boarding house guests. One night, about 6 weeks after they arrived in Tucson, Isaac took Victoria's hand and led her to sit beside the fountain. The water reflected the starlight, creating a magical atmosphere. "Victoria, I know we have only known each other for a few months, but I also feel like I have known you my whole life. You have brought joy and purpose back to my existence in a way I never thought possible." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band with a small turquoise stone. "This stone comes from my ranch, from that spring where we used to watch the sunsets. I had a jeweler in town set it for me. It is not fancy, but it is real and it is from the heart." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as Isaac got down on one knee. "Victoria Ann, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, support you, and stand by your side through whatever challenges life brings. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, and to never take for granted the gift of your presence in my life." "Yes," Victoria said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Isaac, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed beside the fountain, the water singing its own song of celebration. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying at once, Isaac swept her into his arms and spun her around. "I cannot believe you are mine," he said, setting her down gently. "I cannot believe I knocked on your door asking for directions," Victoria replied, "and you gave me a map to your heart instead." They married a month later in a small ceremony at the Mission Church in Tucson. Miguel and Rosa came in from the ranch to serve as witnesses, and Victoria's few new friends from Tucson filled the remaining pews. It was simple and heartfelt, with Victoria wearing a white dress she had sewn herself and Isaac in his best suit. After the ceremony, they held a celebration in the courtyard of the boarding house, which they had decided to rename River's Rest in honor of their new beginning together. The fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun, and tables laden with food lined the courtyard walls. Miguel played guitar while Rosa sang, their voices filling the space with joy. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the courtyard, Isaac pulled Victoria into a dance. They moved together naturally, as if they had been dancing together for years. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked softly. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Victoria answered honestly. "I thought I was coming to Tucson to claim a property to start a business, but I found so much more." "We both did," Isaac said. "That day you knocked on my door, I had no idea my life was about to change completely. If someone had told me I would be married again, running a boarding house in Tucson, I would have said they were crazy. And yet here we are," Victoria said, smiling up at him. The boarding house thrived under their joint management. Victoria handled the guests and the day-to-day operations, while Isaac managed the maintenance and financial aspects. They made an excellent team, each complementing the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Word spread about River's Rest, about the fair prices, clean rooms, and warm hospitality. But more than that, people talked about the couple who ran it, the rancher and the schoolteacher who treated everyone with equal respect and kindness. Mexican families knew they would not face discrimination at River's Rest. Travelers from back east found themselves welcomed and educated about the realities of the West, not the romantic myths. Working people could afford to stay there without breaking their budget. Isaac made monthly trips back to the ranch to check on Miguel's management, and sometimes Victoria accompanied him. Those trips became precious to both of them, a chance to escape the bustle of town life and reconnect with the place where their love story began. They would ride out to their spring and sit for hours, talking or simply enjoying the silence together. About a year into their marriage, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Isaac's fear about losing another wife and child resurfaced, making him overprotective and anxious. Victoria had her own fears, knowing the dangers women faced in childbirth, but she tried to stay calm for both their sakes. "I am not Sarah," she told Isaac gently one night when his worry was especially evident. "And this pregnancy is not that pregnancy. We will be careful. We will get the best medical care available, and we will trust that things will work out." Isaac pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. "I cannot lose you, Victoria. I just cannot." "You will not," she promised, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. "But we cannot live in fear. We have to have faith." As Victoria's pregnancy progressed, the boarding house guests treated her like precious cargo, insisting she sit down whenever possible and helping with tasks that required heavy lifting. Rosa came to stay with them for the final 2 months, her experience with childbirth providing comfort and practical guidance. Isaac hired additional help for the boarding house so Victoria could rest more, and he began sleeping with one eye open, alert to any sign that something might be wrong. The doctor visited regularly, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy, but Isaac would not relax until the child was safely delivered. Victoria went into labor on a cool October evening in 1883. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, but Rosa and the doctor guided her through it while Isaac paced the courtyard, nearly wearing a path in the tiles. When he finally heard the cry of a baby, he rushed inside to find Victoria exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "We have a son," she said, her voice hoarse from effort. "A beautiful, healthy son." Isaac approached slowly, hardly daring to believe everything had worked out. When he looked down at the baby, tears streamed unchecked down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for this gift." They named him Daniel Isaac Rivers, and from the moment he entered their lives, he became the center of their world. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, getting up for night feedings even though Victoria was nursing, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at him. The boarding house adjusted to accommodate the new arrival. Guests cooed over baby Daniel, and several women offered child-rearing advice that ranged from helpful to absurd. Miguel crafted a beautiful wooden cradle, and Rosa sewed clothes from soft cotton that would not irritate the baby's skin. As Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, he became the unofficial mascot of River's Rest. He would toddle through the courtyard, greeting guests with babbling enthusiasm, and curl up in the lobby with his picture books while Victoria worked the front desk. Isaac taught him to be gentle with animals, to say please and thank you, and to treat everyone with respect regardless of their background. When Daniel was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, Isaac's anxiety was less intense, bolstered by the successful delivery of their first child. Their daughter, Sarah Victoria Rivers, was born in the spring of 1887, a spring that brought unusual amounts of rain and turned the desert into a carpet of wildflowers. Victoria had insisted on naming their daughter after Isaac's first wife, wanting to honor the woman who had been part of his life. Isaac had been moved to tears by the gesture, understanding it as the act of generosity and love that it was. Sarah was a quiet baby, observant and calm where Daniel had been energetic and vocal. She seemed content to simply watch the world around her, taking everything in with serious dark eyes. Isaac loved to hold her in the evenings, singing softly while Victoria put Daniel to bed. Their family continued to grow over the years. Two more sons followed, Thomas in 1889 and Michael in 1892, rounding out their household to four children who filled River's Rest with laughter and chaos in equal measure. The boarding house remained successful throughout the 1890s, weathering economic downturns that closed other businesses. Isaac's ranch also continued to prosper under Miguel's management, providing a steady second income that allowed them to save for their children's futures. As the century drew to a close, Isaac and Victoria would sometimes sit in their courtyard late at night, after the children were asleep and the guests had retired to their rooms, and marvel at how their lives had unfolded. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked one night. "Giving up teaching, taking a chance on a lonely rancher you barely knew." Victoria took his hand, the turquoise ring he had given her so many years ago still shining on her finger. "Not for a single moment. You gave me a life I never dared to dream of. You gave me love, partnership, and a family. What could I possibly regret? I am the one who got the better end of this bargain," Isaac insisted. "I was barely living before you knocked on my door. You brought me back to life." "Then I suppose we both won," Victoria said, kissing him softly. As their children grew into adolescence and young adulthood, Isaac and Victoria watched with pride as each found their own path. Daniel followed Isaac's love of ranching, eventually taking over management of the property when Miguel retired. Sarah discovered a passion for teaching, attending normal school in California, and returning to Tucson to start a school for Mexican children who had been excluded from the main public school. Thomas showed an aptitude for business, helping to expand River's Rest by purchasing adjacent properties and creating a larger hotel complex. Michael, their youngest, became a writer, documenting the changing face of the American West and championing causes of justice and equality. Through it all, Isaac and Victoria remained partners in every sense of the word. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated each other's successes, and never lost the sense of wonder that they had found each other against all odds. When Isaac turned 60 in 1912, Victoria organized a celebration in the courtyard of River's Rest, now expanded and modernized but still retaining its essential character. Their children and grandchildren filled the space, along with friends and guests from over the years. Miguel and Rosa, now elderly but still sharp, sat in places of honor. As the party wound down and family members began to drift away, Isaac found Victoria sitting by the fountain, watching the water sparkle in the evening light. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her. "I was thinking about the first time we sat here together," Victoria said. "The night you proposed. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I knew that night that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you," Isaac said, "and I have not changed my mind once in all these years." "Neither have I," Victoria said, leaning against his shoulder. "We built something good here, Isaac. Not just this business, but a life, a family, a legacy." "We did," Isaac agreed. "And it all started because you knocked on my door asking for directions." Victoria laughed, the same bright laugh that had captured Isaac's heart 30 years earlier. "Best wrong turn I ever took." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, two people who had found each other in the vast wilderness of the Arizona Territory and built a love that had weathered decades and challenges. Around them, the boarding house hummed with life, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Upstairs, Their grandchildren slept safely, protected by the foundation their grandparents had built. As the years continued to pass, Isaac and Victoria gradually stepped back from the daily operations of River's Rest, allowing Thomas and his wife to take over management. They spent more time at the ranch, which Daniel had transformed into one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1924, their children organized a surprise celebration. Family came from across the Southwest, filling the ranch house and spilling out onto the property. Sarah brought her students, who performed songs they had learned in school. Thomas presented them with a leather-bound book containing letters from guests who had stayed at River's Rest over the years, each sharing how the couple's kindness had impacted their lives. Daniel and Miguel, who had maintained a close relationship over the decades, led Isaac on a ride to the spring that still held such meaning. Victoria, though her knees were not what they used to be, insisted on coming along. They sat on the same rocks where Isaac had proposed so many years before, watching the sun set over the land they loved. "I would not change a single thing," Isaac said, his hair now completely white but his eyes still sharp and green. "Not one moment, not one decision. It has all led to this, and I am grateful." Victoria, her auburn hair faded to silver but her spirit as strong as ever, squeezed his hand. "We have been blessed. We found each other when we both needed it most, and we built something that will outlast us." "The children will carry it forward," Isaac said, "and their children after them, rivers, all of them, flowing into the future." They sat together as they had so many times before, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. Behind them, their family laughed and celebrated, the sound carrying on the desert wind like a promise. Isaac Rivers passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1928, at the age of 76. He died at the ranch he had built with his own hands, with Victoria holding his hand and their children surrounding the bed. His last words were, "Thank you for knocking on my door." Victoria lived for another 5 years, continuing to spend time with her children and grandchildren, telling stories about the early days of River's Rest and the Arizona Territory. She attended Sarah's retirement celebration, watched Thomas expand the hotel business into Phoenix, and saw Michael win an award for his book about Western history. When Victoria passed away in 1933, also peacefully and surrounded by family, she was buried next to Isaac in a small cemetery near the ranch. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: "Partners in life, partners in love, together forever." River's Rest continued to operate successfully for decades, becoming a landmark in Tucson. The original courtyard and fountain were preserved, and guests still heard stories about the couple who had started it all, the rancher and the school teacher who found love in the Arizona desert. The ranch remained in the Rivers family, passed down through generations, each adding their own improvements while respecting the foundation Isaac had built. The spring where Isaac and Victoria had spent so many evenings remained a special place, visited by their descendants who came to remember and to feel connected to their remarkable ancestors. Daniel's children grew up hearing stories about how their grandfather had opened his door to a lost traveler and found his life's greatest love. Sarah's students, many of whom became teachers themselves, carried forward her legacy of treating all children with equal dignity and respect. Thomas's hotel empire bore the River's name, and every property maintained the principles of fair treatment and warm hospitality that Isaac and Victoria had established. Michael's books preserved the history of a changing West, including detailed accounts of his parents' lives and the world they had inhabited. The story of Isaac and Victoria became something of a legend in Tucson, and the surrounding areas. Young couples would visit their graves, hoping some of that enduring love might rub off on them. The fountain in the courtyard of River's Rest was said to bring good luck to anyone who tossed in a coin and made a wish about love. But beyond the legend, beyond the successful businesses and accomplished children, Isaac and Victoria's greatest legacy was the love they had shared and the lives they had touched. They had treated people with dignity in an era when such treatment was far from universal. They had built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. They had raised children who understood the value of hard work, kindness, and standing up for what was right. Their love story, which began with a simple knock on a door and a request for directions, had become a roadmap for how to live a good life. It showed that second chances were possible, that love could bloom in unexpected places, and that two people who committed to building something together could create ripples that spread far beyond their own lives. The Arizona desert, harsh and beautiful, had witnessed their entire journey. It had seen Victoria arrive lost and exhausted, had watched Isaac emerge from his shell of grief, had been the backdrop to their courtship, marriage, and the raising of their family. The land had tested them with its extremes and rewarded them with its stark beauty, teaching them resilience and appreciation for every precious moment. In the end, Victoria had indeed been looking for directions that day she knocked on Isaac's door. But the path she found was not the one she had been seeking. Instead of a route to Apache Junction and a boarding house, she found a journey to love, family, and a life richer than any she had imagined. Isaac, in turn, had been given a second chance at happiness, proof that grief did not have to be the final word in his story. Their descendants carried forward the values Isaac and Victoria had lived by, creating positive change in their communities and treating all people with the respect and dignity they deserved. The river's name became synonymous with fairness and integrity, a reputation built on the foundation two people had laid over 40 years of marriage. And so the story that began with a woman knocking on a door, asking for directions, became a tale of love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a reminder that the most important journeys are often the ones we do not plan, and that sometimes getting lost is the only way to truly find what we have been seeking all along. Isaac had given Victoria a map to his heart, and she had followed it faithfully, finding not just love, but home.